Good morning, everybody. Today, we are on the second day of the multidisciplinary webinar series of social sciences. And we have Dr. Biju BL, Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, School of Social Sciences, Hyderabad Central University with us. Dr. Biju, areas of interest are political theory, Indian political process, politics of globalization, society and politics in Kerala. And selected publications of Dr. Biju are Bipolar Coalition System in Kerala, Carriers and Gatekeepers of Communal Forces in Politics, Right to Information, a paid right in neoliberal politics. Without much ado, I request Dr. Biju to start the presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anak. Welcome, dear friends. Today, my topic of class is about new institutionalism and neoliberalism. These are two concepts, but these have some way of methodological implications for the social research that we are doing, not only in political science, but in social science in general. And as any other issue and other method in social science, these are not standing as products of some labs like in sciences. But generally, these two approaches are emerging in social sciences in relation to certain types of deeper and long-term changes in our political life. Political life includes different aspects of politics. There we can see economics as a dominant area, or economy as a dominant area from which actually changes emanate, and these changes have a high degree of influence in the political life, what we call as political life, institutions, and also there are strong implications on ideological thinking, which you can see a relation between the dominant way of thinking in terms of ideology with what we do as a structured systematic research. In no social research, hitherto existing social research, we can say that all types of researches are employed by the power relations of society. So these two things, new institutionalism and neoliberalism more is influencing and shaping the power relation, or it's a kind of a reflection or an ideology coming out of a kind of class relation of capitalism. So the social relations of power are important in understanding any type of methodological changes or any type of dominant methodology mainly that we use in social research. So social research cannot be separated from the dynamics of society. This is a broader perspective from which I would like to look into this relation between new institutionalism and neoliberalism. I am not very clear about how you are looking at it in your syllabus. Are you trying to think about it as two approaches, largely define different methods, or these are two phenomena that we want to study it? But anyway, I was not very much clear of which aspect I should focus, so I would focus on both. First, I will introduce what is the approach named as institutionalism in political science, or institutional approach in political science, and what is the new institutional approach in political science, why it come about, and what are the major lines of inquiry, and what are the implications, and how it is related to certain types of social power relation. I told you already, because social power relations are influencing research. So any research method we are picking and choosing may have an impact, or may have an inbuilt relation between, or indirect relation between the social phenomenon and also the social structural realm. So this one we should take into consideration. By that, following that perspective, if you look at the new institutionalism or institutionalism in general and neoliberalism, how this new institutionalism and neoliberalism are connected, I will tell you, because as much as you can connect with the institutionalism with the liberalism as a political philosophy emerged in the West in a particular context of 18th century. That type of a relation you can see between new institutionalism and neoliberalism. That's why if liberalism is a philosophical father of institutional approach, I would consider we will have to consider neoliberalism as a father of or parent of the new institutional approach. So these are anyway well connected. Let us look at what is the institutional approach in political science. You may know about, because at your MA level you might have learned more about or sufficiently about what are the different approaches in political science. There all you will read and analyze what is institutionalism. So this is the background. So just let me look at it first and explain the way in which I can understand it. So can I share the slide now, Anak?
Sure, sir. Sure.
It's already shared, I think, so you can display it. New
Yes.
Institute, this is the
Yes,
title.
sir.
Yeah, I'll go into. So what is institutionalism? Institutionalism, in different way we are studying politics based on institution. You may all know well that in political science anyway, the distinction of political science or the distinctiveness of political science is always claimed by dominant or mainstream political scientists, as they are studying certain types of political institutions. Institutions does not stand alone. There will be law and constitution and laws to bind all institutions. So these legal approach and institutional approach are actually Siamese twins in a sense. One we can take into consideration without neglecting the other, because that's why the two, institutional approach, legal approach, or constitutional approaches, are broadly looking at the same. But there may be some kind of varying degree of emphasis on law in legal approach and institutional aspects in organizational, structural aspects of institution in institutional approach. Otherwise, these two are highly interrelated approaches: institutional approach and legal approach. So look at the institutionalism of the old type of political science research. There would be a normative content, and this normative content would be concerned with the idea of good government. You may be surprised because whether we have abandoned it now, no. But anyway, it was taken in a purely philosophical way in the old institutional approach. But now we are not looking at in terms of purely philosophical way. And also, if some of us wants to add some philosophical emphasis on what is the good government, sometimes
Sorry
we will
for the
say
interruption,
now,
sir.
today, in a more neutral,
Uh,
objective way rather than going by
Excuse
any
me, sir.
philosophical way. That's why the normative dimension of old institutionalism was more explicit. That is one type of institutional studies that was going on in the field of political science. And they were concerned about how to bring about good government and what is good government, what is good and bad, etc. Unlike the value neutral or objective way of presentation of governance today, that was quite different in old institutional way. That is one type of institutional studies, normative institutional studies. And second one is structuralist institutional studies. Structuralist, here we need not go into deep structure. Old institutionalists never went into the deep structure. Deep structure, if we look at deep structure is social structure of power relation. But the old institutionalists, only very few of them might have gone, and normally they would not go. But what do they mean by structuralism is certain type of structures that determine political behavior. The structure is inseparable from the cultural and values, etc. They are not going into the power relation dimension of structure, but just they would look at the structure as the peripheral way in which it appears in the form of cultural traits, nationally upheld values of citizens, how they are affecting institution, etc. in a peripheral way, not in a deep, in-depth way of looking at structure. And third one is historicist type of institutionalism, old institutionalism. Nowadays also people are looking for history of institution to sketch its character, and also its importance, significance, etc. But earlier, because institutional approach was part of this historicist understanding, and this is a central influence of history is very evident. A historical sketch of institutions, that is one way of looking at historicism. Second way of looking at it is a kind of a particular path of stages or particular type of an evolution is there, and that evolution is, if something happen in the level of institutional development, that would follow certain things. And if another type of institution is in existence, the consequences may be different. Based on that, they are sketching this type of a reasoning on the basis of their understanding of history of institutions, and they are coming with certain type of cause and effect relation in a sense. And the fourth one is a kind of legalist understanding that I already said, because institutionalism and legalism are connected. So some of the scholars who were following, many of the scholars who were following this institutional approach in political science have studied the institutional institutions, and also they looked at institution from a legalist point of view. And another one is a kind of a holistic descriptions. Holistic descriptions are available in all the comparative institutions, means comparative institution study in political science. Sometimes they may compare American government with British government, or British government with French government. This type of a holistic, the country as a whole, for them, a politics of a country as a whole is a whole sum of institution for them. So they will look at legislature, judiciary, and legislature, judiciary, and executive, and there may be different names in different countries. Whatever may be, these are the three components of the formal institutional apparatus of the state. So they will look into that, and they will bring into a kind of comparative government studies. That always, this holism. Holism also may be interpreted a little bit high philosophical way, and a middle and bottom line of shallow philosophical way. So here anyway, holistic doesn't mean a kind of a big philosophical dimension of holism, but just it means in the among the circles of the old institutionalism, what is holism is actually about the totality of the government at the appearance level, not at the level of substance, but appearance level. Sum total of government means sum total of the leading political institutions of a country. That political institutions can be divided into executive branch of government, legislative branch of government, and judicial branch of government. Then they would go for a kind of a holistic idea of politics of a country by looking at the holistic view of, because the sum total of the individual parts of the government, sum total of it forms the government. And then these are the 5 types of old institutional studies that was available in analyzing politics. I told you in the beginning, because at that time politics is only study about state. That state, how does it stand? The state is appearing only in the form of its institutions and constitution. So constitution and institutions, if you look at and analyze, then this is sufficient for this would be sufficient for studying politics. That was an old approach that was discredited later, and now people do not follow the old institutionalism. That's why we talk about new institutionalism. Old institutionalism is not sufficient. For example, if you want to study Indian politics, if you just read the old articles of Indian Constitution, and also you look at the organizational arrangement of executive, judiciary, and legislature, that doesn't tell you, now you know well, that never explain what is Indian politics. So Indian politics, if we want to look at, we will have to go beyond institutions to understand it. Beyond institution in 2 ways. First is actually you will have to consider non-institutional factors which are affecting the working of institution and shaping the politics. And if you think that institutions are important, then we will have to look at how these institutions are interrelated to different other things. That's why the institution in action may be an interrelationship, showing an interrelationship between institutions and other factors. Other factors means the larger social factors and non-party institutions and party institutions. And institution itself is not in a single way. Earlier studies also institutions were considered not in a singular way, singular noun institution, but they also used institutions. But what are the parts of what they call as institutions was very limited. That's why the membership or the component parts of institutions were very limited in old institutionalism. That also shows that one of the major limitation of institutionalism. Later we know that politics is a all-encompassing activity kind of definitions are coming up. So politics is becoming a study of power, not only power like we are studying or looking for power in some power bank kind of a thing, but we would look at power in power relation. So study of politics nowadays is becoming more widened than before. So politics, sometimes we say that the people who are following political science will say that we are studying politics and there is nothing outside politics. So everything is within the like sociology is saying about sociology is a science of society. So nothing in society can be studied without the help of sociology, or sociology they defined beginning as science of society. That was coming as a kind of all-encompassing discipline. So every discipline tried to do like that. Every discipline tries to do like that. And political science also has such an advantage in placing it above all discipline, or including all aspects of social life, by placing its center or its core area of analysis as power and power relations. This power and power relation, if you think about, we will consider institution as only one among the many arenas of power. That's why there is institutional politics and non-institutional politics, or types of. That's why we will have to weigh where actually we will have to weigh our attention to institutional or non-institutional aspects of life. So institutional and non-institutional aspects of power is more important. That way, some people or many people by the beginning or the first quarter of 20th century thought about the old type of institutional analysis would not tell much about what is politics. So what is politics is sometimes laying outside the institutions, and some other aspects are becoming more important than the institutions in daily politics. With the expansion of democracy, beginning of democracy and its expansion, the politics became more involving society. So society became more involved in politics because more people are getting the adult suffrage benefit, and voting rights are expanded. Various types of demand articulation mechanisms are coming into being, and various other conflicts are also becoming more complex rather than the simple way it was articulated at a time. And the interrelationship between people and institution and among the people and various issues are also becoming very complex. So the politics, the power play is, sometimes we say that power play is moving out of formal level, the appearance level also the power play is moving out of institutions. And many people say that at a time people thought that institutions will express a formal arena of power struggle, and whatever the institution says may be about politics. Whichever way the institution is structured is telling more about politics. Later we think that the institutions are becoming not the key representative of politics in society, and others will think that institutions are just a derivative of the deeper politics in society. So institutions are not standing as the origin of power relation, but institutions are becoming, a Marxist understanding is telling us like that. Institutions are actually the product of the way in which certain types of social relations of power exist in society. So they will say that feudal relations of power will create a feudal state and feudal institutions. Capitalist relations will of power, or capitalist relation of production or production relation will create a kind of, will lead to the creation of certain types of liberal democratic institutions. But they all are there and not standing as independent, but always in interaction with the relation of production. And this relation of production, they will always interact more and responsive to and cater to the need of the dominant classes who are the ruling class. So the ruling class in power relation will control the state and state apparatus. That's a kind of, because there also they don't give any kind of, Marxists also, even they are looking at the interrelationship between institution and society, they never treat institution as standing alone, as the agent of change, or simply professing some philosophies and articulating justice for all. That's why the institution look from a conflict theory point of view, like Marxism. Always institutions are expressing the conflict, which is not between two parties which are running the state, debating in the legislature, not the two party leaders who are representing the national consciousness, but the politics is laying outside the institution, and these people are expressing directly or indirectly the tensions and parties to the tension, means which are the parties to the tension, and the representatives, and the, that's why through the representatives also we cannot see, the people's representatives also we cannot see the real politics directly unless you have a researcher's eye. If you have a researcher's eye, you will not stop with. That's why the advanced way of research and advanced level of knowledge in social science have already made the old institutionalism an outmoded exercise. That doesn't mean that institutions are insignificant, but they are not sufficient. If your focus is only on institution, and isolating institution from all other things. And that way, if you are looking at politics, or if you are analyzing a country, and then you are coming to a conclusion that this is sum total of politics there, people won't believe you. People will consider you as you haven't even done your masters. That's why I'm saying, because if you are a high school student, if you are a high school student, or plus two to certain extent, may give us some satisfaction about if a person is doing an institutional analysis only and coming with a conclusion that this is the politics of the country, then we would be satisfied. But anyway, once we are graduate students and postgraduate students and researchers, anyway, we know that nobody of us would believe a person's analysis focusing on institution and saying that this is the sum total of politics of a country. We won't believe him. We won't take it as a kind of a major finding at all. So we'll consider that his study has a drawback, because it is a kind of institutional reductionism is there in his study. That never means that institutions are becoming irrelevant. They are becoming relevant, but they are not the sum total of politics. That is a way in which old institutionalism was criticized, and a variety of methods were adopted under the rubric of behavioralism. Then mainly started in American academia, with some collaboration from some of the British academicians, and then we see European academicians, and then we see a kind of a behavioral revolution that all of social science students may know well. I don't want to give the details. Only I want to say that that was one of the first systematic academic effort. Anyway, with all its drawbacks from the point of view of critics, this was one of the first major step of academic endeavor to push political science outside the constraints as well as the fetters of politicals. Remove the fetters of. That's why institutionalism was considered as one of the fetters of expanding knowledge and expanding our inquiry, increasing the scope of the discipline, etc. At a time, institution was the sole focus of political science. Later, we think that there is something else to look at. If we are looking at institution, nothing will come out. Means nothing substantive part of politics would come up. That's why the behavioralist studies were looking at behavioralism, pattern, highly influenced from sociology and psychology, and political science is becoming interdisciplinary. These are plus signs of behavioralism. But they, by and large, what they did is they neglected one part of our important area of inquiry, institution as a whole. And in 1960s onwards, we see that people are showing more interest in institutionalism. But they know well that if they are talking about institutions, two issues they will have to take into consideration in comparison with what the old institutionalists were doing. First is the institutions which they are focusing may be same in the name as the old institutionalists were looking for. But the history of 20th century has made a deeper changes in the institutions in 1960s, by 1960, and the change is continuing now. So we say that all the institutions are contingent upon certain type of historical context. So the new institutional approach is developing by taking into consideration the changes at the level of institution one. And then second one is about the way in which we will have to look at institution should not be the way in which others in the previous generation people were looking at it. So the 1960s onwards, the political scientists were looking at the institution who were analyzing institutions to study politics, look at institutions differently. Behavioralism has already demolished the status of institutionalism as the leading and the only approach in political science. Already it was shattered. But anyway, institutions were continuing. That's one of the problems. Sometimes behavioralists may say that the institutions' predominance has gone, but we know well that there is a kind of a continuity of relevance of institutions even today. That's why it's said in the beginning, institutions are not the only one area we can focus entire our attention to understand politics. It is insufficient, but institutions are important. That's why the institutions are continuing, but our approach to study institution must change. The adaptation of the changes which are necessary to understand institutionalism leads to different type of new institutional analysis. And new institutional analysis, what are the major areas of inquiry? There are many. Mainly two scholars have pioneered the work. Some of you may know, and it is a well-known topic among the scholars in research method and institutional analysis. These two scholars have pioneered research work on new institutionalism, and they started new institutional analysis. Anyway, officially there is a recognition for the two authors. Their names are James G. March and John P. Olson. Rediscovering Institution, the Organizational Basis of Politics, a piece published in 1984. And for a quick summary of what is new institutionalism and how it is different from old institutionalism, for the political science students, I can suggest another work, which is Vivian Lowen's in a book, Theories and Methods in Political Science, Palgrave Macmillan, 2010. Vivian Lowen's is the author. The New Institutional Approach is the title of the chapter or article. And the book is Theories and Methods in Political Science. That is a good book for reading for any of the research scholars who are doing the course. I don't know whether the books which I am suggesting may be part of your syllabus or not, and the syllabus is not unit-wise. So anyway, I'm just suggesting some more materials which I feel as relevant to help you to understand the particular unit which is assigned by the IQAC team to me to take a class or have an interaction with you. So Vivian Lowen's, should I type it and show? Anyway, I don't know, but anyway, I'll share it if you want. I will share the details later with the coordinator, Anak. Vivian Lowen's, just I am saying, Vivien, Lowen's, Lowends. The Institutional Approach is the title of the chapter. And the book's name is Theories and Methods in Political Science. Theories and Methods in Political Science. Palgrave Macmillan is the publisher. David Marsh and Jerry Stroker are the editors. And there are I think there are 20 articles or 20 papers on different approaches in political science, different approaches in research in political science with good example. It's a widely read textbook. I just call it as a textbook, but if you go by the standard of gate books you are seeing, you will feel that this is a very big authoritative test. But anyway, I think this is a textbook based on the Western intellectual standard, but it can be considered according to our Indian condition. I think it would be a kind of a good one to start with. So, new institutionalism, what are the major areas of inquiry? That point we want to discuss now for a few minutes. How institutions emerged and consolidated or failed? Why there is a need to study new institutions? These are some of the questions which are coming. And why should we study new institutions? How institutions emerged and consolidated or failed? We are seeing many institutions have come up and they failed and continuing in certain other countries, but they may be, that's why a comparative analysis of same type of institutions in different country context may lead us to certain types of questions. I don't say that immediately in research an answer will come, that after research an answer will come. In the beginning of a research, these are all questions coming to our mind to look into it in detail. And how institutions emerged, consolidated or failed. Different institutions or same institutions are coming, emerging and consolidating or failing. That type of a way people are looking at. That's why institutions are very important. For example, parliament, if it is there are certain type of assigned functions for legislature, parliament, or in India it is parliament. But in some countries we say that the parliamentary democracy or parliaments are getting legitimacy among the people. But in certain countries, the legitimacy of parliament is not there. But legitimacy of parliament is always what the legitimacy for executive. So executive legislative separation may happen or may not happen. Theoretically and constitutionally, there may be a separation. But in practical sense, and also in terms of people's evaluation, sometimes parliament is becoming just an attached thing to the executive, and executive is the main one. But in a parliamentary democracy, we always say about the executive is accountable to parliament. But here always we see that the executive is always dragging the parliament behind it. That type of a strange transformation or a strange experience is there in, this is strange because it is so much different from what the constitution says. But in some countries we see that the parliament again is holding more legitimacy from the people than in other countries. So in certain countries, the parliament as a legislative institution failed. We cannot look at constitution to find out the reasons for that. We look at beyond the parliament, outside parliament, and if it is a new parliament as it is coming now, or old parliament as it was in India. And this is what I am saying. Even the construction of the building of a new parliament today is also more important for looking at not in constitution, but in several other realms of party competition, party ideology, and other things to find out. That's why I'm saying just an example I am taking from the new parliament construction in India, construction of a new parliament building in India. How will you study it? You look at which company is constructing the new one, what is the model, and which way the old one was constructed, who was the engineer. Not enough. That construction of parliament itself is a kind of a bigger political field. Only you can see the reasons, meanings, etc. Likewise, a politics of a country, if you want to study, you cannot look at the parliament. Even the parliament, if you want to look at the institutional structure, the physical institutional structure of parliament and changes also, you will have to look at it in outside the institution. In that way, I'm saying, because new institutionalism is more demanding from you to look outside the institution, but institution is the way, institution is the core thing, but we want to explain, but not in terms of institution its own. Not in terms of institution its own, we can interpret or explain or analyze an institution, but we will have to look beyond the institution to see what it is actually. That's why institution is a dependent variable rather than an independent variable. This is a way in which new institutionalism look for. But in old institutionalism, institutions are independent variable. And they are actually having the power to decide others rather than affected by other factors. Independent variable and dependent variable. I'm using a research terminology. I hope that all of you may know these simple terms, etc. And there is another question which is coming up, why there is a need to study new institutions. New institutions are coming up. New institution may be the old in form, but new in content or new in its working. So old institutions may be continuing, but there is a kind of a change. We can detect the way in which the institutions are interacting with society. And anyway, bureaucracy is the best one. Bureaucracy, if you look at bureaucracy, bureaucracy is an institution which way is emerged, and there is some kind of Weberian principles behind bureaucracy. We know well that that is not the bureaucracy we have. How this type of a change happened, but they never abandoned the name like civil service, bureaucracy, etc. Name and structure may be the same, the hierarchical arrangement may be same, but its working may be different. And what are the different factors which are causing the change? That's why we are looking for some new institutions. Why there is a need to study new institution of two types. Some of the institutions which are existing from the past, but anyway have a new orientation and new mode of working. That's why they are new. Sometimes new institutions have also been created. In India, you may know, because a large number of institutions, new institutions were coming after the neoliberal policy. That I will come to that later, last part of my discussion. And here you see situated embedded analysis of institution in settings. So institutions are not considered isolated for a study. They are not standing on air in a new institutional analysis. Because I already said that that is a dependent variable, not an independent variable. And then how institutions embody, how institutions are situated or embedded in a setting. So the setting we will have to explain first to look at the institution rather than looking at institution and going into the settings. That's why this is new institutional studies. The scope of the study is defined broader than what was the old institutional studies. And how institutions embody values and power relationship is also another issue. How institutions embody values and power relations. Institutions are embodiment of values, embodiment of power relationship. Both are important to look at the way in which institutions are working. Within old institutional approaches also, or old analysis of institution also, critics of the mainstream theory always express this view. But the mainstream theory was going by, mainstream approach was going by, or mainstream spokesperson of institutional approach was going by, institutions are the embodiment of higher values kind of a thing. But actually existing value of institution may be inseparable from the social power relationship in which the institutions are standing. This type of a critical view was there when the old institutionalism was there, or old institutionalism's time also. But nowadays we see that within new institutionalism, these critical voices, the old critical voices in a new form, in accordance with the changes in institutions, etc., they are also taking a lead today. So how institutions embody values, not only values but also power relation, value not for all but for some value. That's why if we modify this question in a Marxist way, we can say that how institutions embody dominant values, that of the dominant class, and dominant mode of power relationship, which give always an advantage for the ruling class. This is a way in which some of the masses can read the fourth question, which we see on the slide. And you see again, what are the enabling and constraining factors? Maybe historical, sociological, political, economic factors which are with the institutions. Means there are enabling factors and constraining factors. So these are some of the new areas of study in political science. New area means from 1960s we started it, so I cannot say completely new, or I can say that contemporary area of new institutional analysis in political science. And then Olson and Olson also asked this question, like, what constitutes a political institution? We have to define it. That definition is quite different from why old institutionalists were defining institution. And then we will have to look at how do they work, rather than what is stated in constitution and what is the formal rules and function of the institution. More than the formal rules and function of the institution, we will have to look into the actual working of the institution. For that, anyway, we will have to go beyond the text. Text in a sense, constitutional text, to look at the way in which then we will have to engage with new and new factors. So we will have to expand our inquiry, and we will have to refine our methodological tools regarding data, and we should also think about the proper coherence in our analysis, etc. And last one here is about how the individuals and group influence the institution. That's largely, this is a component of how institutions embody values and power relationship. And last point is an extension of the fourth point on the slide. How institutions embody values and power relationship. In a different way, we can also ask the question, reframe the question and ask how individuals and groups influence the constitution, and what is its effect on the values and power relationship that the institutions supports. So institutions as a neutral mediator between conflicts is an old idea. Old institutionalists followed it. Even now, the neoliberal people and other type of pro-state approaches in theory of political science may support the view state as an independent arbiter in social relations of conflicting social relations or between contesting social groups. But anyway, we'll have to look at it in detail later if it comes for any further questions. And I'll also say about types of new institutionalism, as many scholars in bracket. Anyway, this was in a box given in the Vivian Launders work. Just I put it here for dissemination of the idea. I'm not creating it, so anyway, I don't have any sole authorship on what I am showing it to you. Normative institutionalism is one branch of new institutionalism. Once we look at the old institutionalism, which I displayed on the slide also, we can see there was also a normative in old institutionalism was. But this now, the normative institutionalism means the institutions, looking at institution from the vantage point of philosophy. The philosophy itself has become plural today. Compared to the modern philosophy, today we know that whether it is postmodern or after postmodern, I am not going by those terminologies. But what I see here, because there are a large number of entry points in philosophy to look at institution today. So the entry points in philosophy today are much more diverse than what we had in earlier times. Gender, caste, race, and different religious right positions or rightist positions, religious liberal positions, religious. So I am telling because the various vantage point of philosophy from which we can approach institutions and analyze are so diverse. So this diversity at the normative plane we should take into consideration when we go for a new institutional analysis. That branch, or we can divide the new institutional studies into different groups, the way in which I am showing this, I am showing on the slide, quoting from Vivian Launders. And the way in which normative institutionalists are looking at institute. That is one position. That is why once you are so much interested in philosophy, you don't say that I won't study institution. Anyway, there is no much big distinction between the old philosophical approach and old institutionalism today, because many people have come up with very innovative research work about which can be tabled. They may not, but we can group them into new institutional framework of the normative variety of new institutionalism, many studies have come up in many branches of social science and particularly in political science also. Rational choice institutionalism is another variety of new institutionalism. Rational choice is giving more importance to actor than the structure. Actor is actually here the individual rational actor, and they have a tendency to universalize this rational understanding, or the people are actually going accordance with their rationality, means what they get and what they lose in the simple sense, how to maximize the gain and how to minimize the pain. This type of a way people are approaching the issue, so that rational approach is important. And then they say that some of the rational choice institutionalists in the new institutionalism variety, they also look for how institutions are also becoming the rational actors. Rather than simple individuals who are looking at, institutions are also rationalizing agents. Sometimes in neoliberal times, this rational choice institutionalism is coming to the fore. That's why we will always say that the state cannot spend more. Like we managing a family, in adjusting our budget, we say that state cannot or the government cannot spend more than what its revenue. It's a commonsensical rationality, not a kind of political larger rationality within which the state. That's why rationalist institutionalists, whether they are finding out a new institutionalism and its own rationality of the institution, or just copying the rationality of the individual actor, the individual, and apply that rationality to the larger institutions. That happens with many of the rational choice institutionalists. They are all advocates of the neoliberal policies and the related institutional changes. So within these institutional changes undergoing in the time of neoliberalism by World Bank and other agencies, and also as a result of media publicity and scientific advices, so-called technical scientific advices, this rational choice institutionalism is creeping into structuring or restructuring the institutions also. That's why rational choice institutionalism is not only an approach, but we can also see that it has an existing phenomenon which is evolving or has been evolving for over a period since 1970s, late 1970s, first started in the West, mainly Britain, America, and another authoritarian country like Chile. And then we see that it's spread of that type of restructuring of economy policy to the third world countries, and in India since 1990s. So we see that the rationalist institutions as rational actors, maybe or not, but anyway, they appear as like that. And there is a big justification for that's why I'm saying, because in new institutional studies, if you want to study the government anyway, this rational choice institutionalism, even if you are not using it as an approach, but you should know the approach to understand what you want to criticize. So Barry Weingast is a scholar's name put in the parenthesis, Barry Weingast. He has studied a lot of changes. Anyway, he is a mainstream scholar in support of neoliberal changes. But he has brought a large number of works about how federalism is adapting with the new economic policy. Means federalism, how it can be restructured to meet the needs of capitalism. He never says it bluntly, but a critical reader of Weingast may understand the way in which he is bringing his analysis and what he supports and what is his normative base. But anyway, he is one of the scholars who is actually using this type of an approach in his analysis. You must know it. If you want to criticize, you must know the way in which he put his analysis. But for understanding rational choice institutionalism, his works are important. Historical institutionalism, we may also know that all the type of institutionalism was also sketching historicism. That's why just let me go back to one of the previous slides here. Institutionalism, here I meant old. They're all I mentioned: normative, structuralist, historicist, legalist, holistic. Some of these elements are actually continuing in the new institutionalism also. Normative, rational choice is a new addition, but historical is there. Empirical institutionalism is also a new addition. It is gaining significance or gaining energy from the behavioral revolution. So behavioralism already says that there is no science without empiricism. Science is actually science to define something as a scientific knowledge. It should be empirical. So this empirical institutionalists, who most closely resemble the traditional approach, classify different institutional types and analyze their practical impact upon government performance. That is also not a kind of a larger empiricism, but a limited empiricism looking into effect of institution rather than the structure and legal rules of institution. They are looking at the effect. Then they are explaining it in empirical way, mainly based on quantitative analysis to great extent. And the second last one here is international institutionalists show that the behavior of states is steered by structural constraint, formal, informal. They are looking at the institutions and their international surrounding of the institutions, and that level also international institutionalism is also coming up today. And then sociological institutionalists, most of the socio-cultural analysis of institution, because many people will say that there is an upper caste state in India, or a Hindu dominant state in India, or a Hindu state is emerging in India, Hindu way of laws or public laws, and all these things are adding. Sociological here means cultural also. Cultural sociological analysis of institution. That also cannot be static, because these are all very dynamic process in society. So sociological institutional analysis or cultural institutional analysis is not looking at the way in which institutions change, but they are also looking at the way in which dominant socio-cultural relations of power in society are also undergoing change. And continuation of the types of new institutionalism, network institutionalism, network society type of. That is different from old institutions. Old institutions were acting in a hierarchical manner. But today we see that because of communication technology and the changes in capitalism in the post-Fordist type of development, you see a kind of capitalism also is sometimes at the appearance level feel that it dismantled the hierarchy and it's going. That's why older capitalists of 19th century will not talk to a customer as a dear friend or a sir kind of a way. But nowadays, because irrespective of class position, if you pick up the call and talk to a capitalist entrepreneur's shop, then suddenly they will give you some status and call you a sir or madam, and then they will start the talk. In response, I don't know whether you will also call them sir, that I am talking because a kind of capitalism is appearing at the appearance level through various types of these strategies is emerging as a level playing field for all. And it pretends that it can provide equality, at least the way of address that I said as sir, madam kind of a thing is also coming up today. And what I am saying here, because this type of a network, that is why hierarchical is moving to a kind of network, at least at the level of, many critics say that this only appear at the level of appearance, but a hierarchy is inbuilt and that is hidden. Sometimes this is used as a facade to cover the internal hierarchy and inequality of capitalism today. But whatever, the network that's why institutions are also becoming network. That's what I am saying. Institutions are also becoming actors like a network rather than a hierarchical old type of bureaucratic. That is why bureaucracy to network. Network may be a different way in which we can understand institutions, network, and also network society and other social. This is also part of sociological and communication studies focus today, and that type of analysis also influenced new institutional studies. And then one more here I want to say, this I put in a wrong way, constructivist institutionalism. This is also a kind of extension of what we know as sociology in a preliminary way. But anyway, constructivist institutionalism is much more advanced way of looking at institutions rather than a simple modern sociological way. And constructivist institutionalism may go into deeper of the depth of the social relation rather than the sociological categories of social relations already established and provided to us to look into. So this constructivist individual institutionalism may look into the institution stand not only in terms of certain types of the social relations of power, but also by creating certain types of narratives, certain types of interpretations, certain type of discourses. These are all coming sometimes within this constructivist institutionalism. Institutions are the constructs of ideological construction, cultural construction. That's why they are looking for not the institution, what the institution is giving to people in material term, but how do the people find out a meaning for certain type of institution. In an older institutionalism, it was simply about legitimacy. More than legitimacy, they are expanding the word of legitimacy, and legitimacy is sometimes understood nowadays as a kind of a forced legitimacy. We'll have to obey it without asking a question, why should we obey? This type of an obedience is coming up, this obedience with consent. Sometimes it may be a little bit related to what we know as hegemony, or a discourse, dominant discourse, hegemony. And these are all types of way in which new institutionalists can look at, and they belong to one stratum, which is known as constructivist institutionalism today. And feminist institutionalism, Vivian Launders put in separate way, and also Marxist institutionalism I also added. There is a regulation theory of state and regime theory of state, which can be called as, and also I think Sherman, H.J. Sherman is one of the leading exponent of Marxist institutionalism. There are many other scholars also, and state theories of Marxism by and large fall into the new institutionalism. State theory of Marxism by Pauline Sass or Jesop and others are also falling into the category of a kind of Marxist way of looking at institutionalism. And also many of the Marxists would not consider themselves, even though we consider them, we means when we are putting them in different groups, we consider them as institutional analysis. Marxism is not simply about an institutional analysis, but some Marxists were responding better than others to the people who are saying that institutions are more important. Without studying institution, we cannot locate our discipline. Within political science also, many Marxists are actually critically interacting with the institutional analysis and producing their own version of how Marxism can respond to the institutional analysis. And most of these recent Marxist studies also, you can say that recent in a sense, last quarter of 20th century onwards, we can place them within the new institutional analysis. Now we want to look at the last portion, but I won't elaborate more on it. This is the political economy of institutionalism. Beginning, I told you that no research method is becoming prominent unless a kind of a social relation is becoming a problem for society. The social relation is becoming the problem, and then the social scientists are feeling about it. And the social relation is becoming a problem, and there will be dominant section and subordinate section there in the social relation. This kind of a way in which the dominant section will always try to control the knowledge production. This knowledge production, always we should be aware of this fact, whether it is in a predominant male in a patriarchal society, or a capitalist in a contemporary class society, capitalist ruling class in a contemporary, and in a upper caste in a caste-ridden society. Irrespective of whichever way in which you find out the power relation in society, there will be one type of a dominant group in that. That dominant group will always try to have a control over the power relation, and to exercise the control further and consolidate it, they will also control the ideological apparatus. So research is always coming mainly as ideological apparatus working in favor of an existing unjust relation. A critical research is different. Critical research is actually questioning the power relation and trying to produce a kind of an alternative viewpoint about the power relation, and also to bring out many of the facts and many of the new research methods which are actually producing a kind of ideological or a kind of intellectual counterpoint to what the ruling class want to propagate. This is the way in which critical research is coming. So research, I told you, always is an extension of the ideological apparatus of the dominant groups demand in power relation. But a critical way, if you look at, actually you can stand at the intellectually opposite to the intellectual opposite. I am not telling that your intellectual opposition has a big role in changing and managing the society only, but you have a role to play. It's okay, you play the role what is possible at the level of this intellectual. That is the relevance of a critical thinking about the dominant research method. Then you see, because you will anyway, I don't deal with many other dimensions of the social power relation, but just I look at the class power relation, and just I am explaining the way in which the political economy of the social relation of power is reflected in new institutionalism. New institutionalism faced a big challenge with the expansion of the role of state, mainly in the post-World War period, first in West and later in third world countries. So the state is assuming a new way of working, new area of activity without having a socialist state. Even in capitalist countries, the state expanded its activities, and state expanded its activities in economy, and more and more areas of the citizens were coming under the direct supervision, control, management, and administration by the state. At that time, we also started a kind of a public administration discipline, and this was actually providing more importance for the studying institutions again. Even though there was a behavioral revolution, they were looking for certain non-institutional matters. Institutions were becoming, mainly the institutions of the state, becoming more central to this welfare state period. We call it as a welfare state. It's an expansive capitalist state. Don't think that welfare state is a socialist state, because unless the socialist relation of production come in the political economy, only then we can say that there is a social state. Otherwise, capitalist relation of capitalist power relations continued. It was not radically altered with something else, something opposite. So we can say that welfare state was actually a kind of liberal capitalist experiment with the help of social democrats and others. But anyway, what we want to see here is the expansion of state activity and expansion of the public institutions, and welfare state related studies were focusing on that. I think most of the studies which were considered as master studies on institutionalism were actually focusing on welfare state. If you read Paulinsa's work or others, they all have a focus on the welfare state. That's why many people are asking a question whether that is sufficient, or the way in which they did. Anyway, they are scholars, but way in which they did is sufficient to look at the new institutions today and the new economy of today, different from the welfare states plus capitalist economy combination. Today, anyway, there is a kind of a so I want to come to the next important political economy change that actually demand for our attention from new economy, new institutionalism, is about neoliberal state and new welfare state. Neoliberal state always say that they are not abandoning the old welfare state, because old welfare states quantitative reach among the population, appeal, etc. is very important, mainly in third world countries. In the West, sometimes people may be wary of taxes, etc. Such a strong middle class against tax, because tax is necessary for a welfare state to expand. So that is anyway kind of, but anyway, in the third world countries where actually the income disparity is high and the big majority are the poor, then normally the welfare state has not lost its former formal appeal. That's why most of the political parties who are professing the capitalist ideology in economic policy may come to the public platform and say that we are with the people. Yesterday or day before yesterday also, we heard such a same comment from our Prime Minister also. So this is a repeated way in which welfare state is still continuing. That's why the capitalist project of neoliberalism is not against, it was against the welfare state, but because of the democratic constraints of democracy, they want to, constraints of expanded democracy, at least in a formal way of incorporation, they cannot say. That's why sometimes they will also come and say that the old welfare state is bad, planning economy is bad, but we want to implement some new state, new welfare. So welfare always is becoming, that's why new welfare state, neoliberal state combination, the institutions are working and managed, and many types of new terms are coming up like governance. And most of these terms were popularized by Western academia first, attached to international funding agencies and big capitalist states. And then these are all coming in combination. That's why in Kerala, anyway, since you are from the state, you may have heard about a term like social capital, how it was criticized by social capital is a new. This is also social capital theory is also looking at institutions from a new way. Institution success not because of the strength of institution or just history or some other factors, but also because of where the social capital is high, the institutions of democracy will win. This is a theory in which Putnam put it, and later many people used it. World Bank adopted the term social capital for some time, and people say that beyond the state we want to look at government and governance studies, governance centers, governance and all. These are all in a way old wine in new bottle, but in a new bottle has a significance. Without the bottle we cannot hold the wine, so the bottle is also important. So we will have to look at the bottle and its features and the way in which bottle is deceiving the eye of the beholder. That's all important. That's where actually the new institutional studies are focusing on is interesting. Sometimes the new institutional studies may be an extension of the academic and research that the ruling class wants to support a kind of or perpetuate a type of an iniquitous power relation in political economy. Or sometimes we can say that there are critical studies about it. Mainly the conflict is about new institutionalism. New institutions are coming. Democratic institutions are expanding all over the world with setbacks, and also a kind of deepening of democratic institutions also happen. Sometimes we are perplexed in the second decade of the 21st century about democratization or democratic institutions. On the one way, we say that deepening democracy. On the one way, we say that horizontal expansion of democracy and vertical percolation of democracy or penetration of democracy. And these two processes are also simultaneously happening for capitalism. Capitalism also expands and percolates. And against all these things, or in support of either one of these, a kind of a rightward political tendency is also spreading all over the world and also downward. These are always affecting the institutions. So these types of larger and important and critical processes of social changes in a sense, the dynamics, we will have to take into consideration when we study the new institutionalism. And I plan that without discussing the background and the differences between institutionalism, non-institutionalism, the background and the way in which we can structure our research, if you are interested in new institutional studies, I cannot look at the particular topic of globalization and or neoliberalism and new institutional relationship. That I will try to address based on your question. Thank you for listening to me for nearly 1 hour, and I request Anak to announce my stopping of the
Yes.
lecture to go for discussion or if any. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we can go ahead with the questions. If there are any questions, hoping that there will be questions, you may drop it in the chat box so that we can. I can forward the same to Biju
I think
sir,
there is a
and
connection
he
problem
will.
from my side or your side. I don't know.
Am I audible, sir? Hello.
I can't hear Anak well.
Can someone tell me whether I'm audible?
Now, the students may ask question in English or Malayalam because anyway, I'm from the state and I know the language. I can see you, Anak.
I think there are no questions.
How many are participating? Anyway,
So there are 22 participants as of now.
okay.
I think there are no questions. If there are no questions, shall we wind up the session, sir?
It's fine for me. Anyway, as you like.
Yeah.
They don't have any option to type also, I think.
They have the options to type, but I can't see any questions as comments.
Are they connected anyway?
Sir,
I mean, I can't see it. That's why I said. Who are connected, I don't know.
there is one
Only I am
question
seeing
from
you.
Sriraj. How the role of MNCs and corporates are taken care by neo-institutionalists?
I should answer it
Hello?
now.
Yeah, you
Hello?
may. Yeah, you may.
How the role, I can see the question also. How the role of MNCs and corporates are taken care of. Anyway, I told you already that there are two types of research is going on. One is looking at the power relation and designing certain types of methods suitable to support the interest, ideological interest of the dominant group. Such studies are in plenty about MNC's role and the relationship with the institution. You can see the studies on corporate governance, and also the good governance literature. A big majority of the sponsored research in good governance is well in accordance with the view that MNCs can take into consideration corporate social responsibility studies, etc., are in a way of giving a plus point for the broader ideological or dominant ideological position that MNCs can bring social prosperity, economic prosperity for the marginalized, etc. Those types of studies are there. Those types of studies and their findings have found significant recognition within the policy circles. In a sense, I am saying that a person can do charity. Charity, anyway, you can do at any time you want. The corporates will do the charity only up to the extent it compromises on its profit. When it touches on its profit, sometimes they will stop it. Most probably, they will stop it. That's why I haven't seen any kind of a big charitable activities and also research fellowships from certain types of such sponsoring agencies today, because it is coming down because of the pandemic. It is affecting. Anyway, there is a belief in people that the multinational corporations can take into consideration the larger interest of the society. In India also we know, because no need of going for a multinational corporations, but national capitalist class in India, from Tata onwards, you see that they have expanded their charitable activities from the beginning. But they were not having any kind of a well-built connection with the institutions. Formal institutions were separate, and Tata was doing his charitable activity. Some way he may be using his goodwill or other type of legal or illegal economic or other influences with dominant political party to get some favor, etc. But now what we see in this new era of neoliberalism, we see a larger connection, inbuilt institutional conglomeration between the private agencies and state institutions. There we see a kind of today's welfare is becoming a kind of joint venture rather than the two separate venture. One is given by the state and the other is given by the provided by the corporates or big rich capitalists, separate private public. Now we see a kind of, we are mixing it together to produce a kind of. That's why if you look at, if some people wants to look at the study of corporate governance structure today and corporate responsibility act and its provisions, and the way in which new institutions are coming as regulating authority of these practices, everywhere you can see that the new institutional approaches are becoming significant to understand it. But which way you taken care of, etc., is a kind of subjective bias of studies. The subjective bias of study, okay, it is your choice in a sense. Only thing in academic field is to justify it on the basis of certain methodological principles, and also some element of common sense is anyway basic thing, and other thing. But other than that, anyway, you are free to do research in either of these ways. And that is said because dominant research pattern is already there within new institutions, and look at the issue and providing a kind of support for the dominant power relation. And second option is to look at the issue critically, and anyway, no need of standing with the bottom group in a sense, or that is your choice again. But there is an option for looking at the entire exercise critically and take a kind of a critical position to do a critical research. This critical research anyway would be treated as a kind of an anti-power anti-system kind of a language, and that type of a language, and the iniquitous structure of power relation we are trying to criticize. There many people have different views. Many academicians and scholars have different views. Somebody say that we cannot go like that, so we should do certain things to justify whatever it is and find out some via media kind of middle path research type of a thing. There are plenty of choices in social research, but what I am saying, because whatever may be the choice you are making, that is anyway on basis of different justifying, but know that there are different approaches and understand that also. If you are trying to use a kind of a critical approach in research methodology, critical of all these things, you must understand how the people who want to justify the power relation are designing their research. That's why at the research methodology level, if you are a Marxist or a non-Marxist, you will have to study both Marxism and non-Marxism, or a critical theory or a status quoistic theory. The basic problem is that without understanding, we can't criticize. Look at the example of Marx. He studied Capital and then he tried to criticize. Some of the academic individuals today, young and old, may have a kind of a problem because they have a limitation for understanding certain things which they don't like. That is a big issue, because if you don't understand new institutionalism's mainstream research pattern, you may go with prejudice, etc., but understand it first, then you can come with a critical opinion about it, or a critical program against it you can structure. That's why I said, because even if we think that the new institutionalism is dominant stream of new institutionalism is in support of this private-public cooperation, we are calling it as public-private partnership, not only in infrastructure but also in welfare. In welfare, you can see a kind of corporate responsibility, etc. How does it come? What are the ways in which work? What is the actual result of it, and which way it is working? These are all important. And what demands for that now? Earlier it was two separate activities, by and large formally disconnected. Now formal unity. Formal level, these new institutions of welfare is very interesting to study. New institutions of welfare. That's why social capital related research we are doing in a two way. One is actually a pro-capitalist argument, a depoliticized development argument. And second one is a kind of a more political, politicized argument. John Harris' work, if you look at, because one of the concepts in the new institutional analysis is social capital, how the Putnam is looking at it, and other pro-capitalist, pro-liberal people are looking at it, and how a person who is criticizing it is looking at it. John Harris is looking at it from a different view, and Putnam. Anyway, there is no, we need not limit our reading of social capital, a concept of new institutional approach. Is not limited to Harris alone, but many others have also come up with several types of criticism against the idea of social capital. So the same thing may be applied to how the role of MNCs are taken care of by new institutions. Dominant stream will take care of. Dominant liberals were always, dominant institutionalists were also taking into consideration the old capitalism. Means old means pre-neoliberal phase of capitalism. And now the new institutionalists, the dominant stream will take care of who are the powerful stakeholders of the strong and powerful stakeholders of capitalism. That will be common to any academic exercise, but there will be a critical stream also. These two coexist with all academic debates. So the stream of research, you must understand only one thing, because you should know well about how your intellectual opponent is practicing research. Then only you can criticize them and engage with that. With a kind of shallow idea of what your opponent wants to say and how he is structuring his research and suggesting you to do it. Without knowing that, you can't do. But at the knowledge level, there is no intellectual opponent or friend, but every stream of research and research method should be studied with an open mind.
Okay, sir. Any more questions? If not, shall we wind up the session, sir?
It's okay.
Okay. So, thank you for being with us, sir. And before vote of thanks, I think we have Dr. Anita MN, coordinator social science research with us. I request Anita MN, Madam, to kindly felicitate the function. Madam, please.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah,
Am I
Madam, you're
audible?
audible. Yes, Madam. Yes, Madam.
Hello.
Yeah, Madam, you're audible.
Okay, okay. Respected key speaker of the day. Okay. Respected key speaker of the day, Dr. Biju B. Coordinator of this seminar, Adib PH, and other participants. Today we have an interesting session, not only for the political science students, for the entire social science stream students are useful for today's speak. Thank you, Biju sir, for providing this wonderful speech. Actually, the wants social science research committee to coordinate 3 webinars from each stream, but the political science students themselves ready to conduct 5 webinar series from their own effort. So I appreciate the effort taken by the political science students, and I wish you all the best to the entire program in the coming future programs also. All the best once again. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you. And on behalf of Research Committee and
Hello.
IQAC, Maharaja's College.
Hello.
I thank Biju BL for being with us, and I thank you all. I thank all the participants who have been in the session and who have been with us in the whole 1.5 hour, and hoping that you have benefited from the session. I hope that Dr. Biju BL will be able to contribute to the entire academics and for our research in the near future also. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So can I leave?
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
You will remove me
you.
or I should remove? Stop
Yes, sir, you can
sharing.
leave the studio.
I can leave, okay. Mute.